There's more than that. Is there just Wi-Fi on our phone? How does our phone connect? Through magic? It does. So you have a cellular connection, and that one is a little hard for us to break, but most of you have a Wi-Fi connection on your phone because you don't want to pay for unlimited data through Verizon or US Cellular or Sprint. Or if you're on AT&T, you don't even have a connection down here unless you're on Wi-Fi. But there's other models on here. So most of you have either a newer Apple or a Samsung, it looks like when I glance around. You guys have what's called near-field communications, right? You can pay at McDonald's. Have any of you done that? Paid at McDonald's through your Google Wallet yet? No? Or your Apple Pay, you can do the same thing. You literally get your phone within about 2 inches, and it can actually transfer information. That's very handy, but the word I heard over here was dangerous. Is it more dangerous than putting it in your hand? It really is. And so we need to think about that. But I will tell you, the one that scares the living daylights out of me on this phone is one you all use and you probably don't realize it's even on there. Or if you get in your car and your phone hooks up to your car, it's done that through what? Bluetooth? So when you set up that Bluetooth account, what did it take for a password? It gives it to you on the phone usually. Or you use what? 0000 or 1234. Oh, that's not very safe. You have less than 10,000 possibilities. How long do you think it would be before I could grab your Bluetooth? And from Bluetooth, can I get into anything on your phone? So how far can Bluetooth reach out? What's the range on Bluetooth? So if you have an Apple Watch, and I see a few of you in here that have Apple Watches, how far can your watch and your phone get separated and still work? If you're connected to the Wi-Fi and you're on the same network, yes, because the Apple Watch does do a connection there that we don't usually realize. But in general, about 30 feet. But can Bluetooth go further? And in fact, I really wanted to, but I've been turned down to build what we call a Bluetooth cannon. And because it looks like a shoulder-mounted rocket launcher, apparently that seems to trigger some people. But experimenters have built a Bluetooth cannons that are a very directional antenna, and they have been able to pick up and send Bluetooth over 200 feet. Well, now I'm sitting there finding this crowd of people, and your password is 0000 or 1234, and I could break into most of your phones. Should that scare you? It probably should. And we'll talk about a couple of terms in there for Bluetooth. But I just wanted to get everybody out here and see that, A, nobody still has a flip phone in here. It did not appear to be. But the reality is, all these conveniences, they all have some kind of a security risk. So we're going to talk about a couple of these different types of attacks. Bluetooth, that near-field communication. What other kinds of attacks? RFID attacks? Wireless attacks on Wi-Fi? And when we get back from break, we're actually going to attack, and we're going to create what we call a man-in-the-middle attack. And we're going to create one. I have ordered a device called a pineapple, and we'll go look at it. And so in class, we're going to get to play with that a little bit. So Bluetooth. What's wrong with Bluetooth? We already said it's kind of scary. So there's a couple of ways that Bluetooth can work. And Bluetooth creates what's called a piconet, a small network. So Bluetooth is a short range in theory, but we use it for a lot of things. It's used for mice, it's used for keyboards, it's used for your phones. And so it actually creates a Bluetooth piconet, creates this idea of the first connection out there is what we call the master, and then we have what we are called slave connections to it. And so we create those connections. Once those connections are established, we usually keep those credentials, which is one of the scary things. But we have a couple of different types of attacks for it. So the most common thing you're going to see, How many of you went to a major mall and all of a sudden weird messages popped up on your phone? Have you had that happen yet? If you haven't, you're going to see that more and more prevalently. And so at the bigger malls, bigger establishments, that's what they call bluejacking. Because they see that active connection and now they can tell where you're at, we can send targeted ads to your phone. And in some cases, you allow that. So if you install what's a popular store in a mall? I'm going to throw one out. Victoria's Secret. All right. So if you're in Victoria's Secret and you get the Victoria's Secret app, in a lot of cases what it does is it says, if you read through all the criteria, it says, hey, I'm allowing this phone to be taken over when I get close to it. And I walk into the mall that's got a Victoria's Secret, and suddenly you get an extra 20% off coupon that day. That's pretty nice. But it's also a little creepy. So bluejacking, in some cases, we don't realize we've turned that on. In some cases, it truly is completely a malware attack. So bluejacking is where we're getting information sent to our phone that we don't necessarily want. So messages, spam, you may see sounds, it may turn on images. So you're going to see that. Bluejacking is generally considered one way. It's to your phone. So you're not losing anything, but it's kind of an invasion of your privacy. You're seeing that these things appear. And, you know, I'm trying to figure out why I have a Victoria's Secret app on my phone and why I'm getting messages from them, right? So why am I getting these sales? Well, I better go into a hot topic because it's a sale this week or something. So I've been in a mall. It scared me. So the other attack that we see, though, is called blue snarfing. So if I just said those two, and I said bluejacking and blue snarfing, and asked which was the most or the more horrible attack of the two, you'd probably say, oh, bluejacking sounds bad. Blue snarfing is actually, though, where we are taking that connection and we are actually getting all the data off of your phone. So we are snarfing that data up. So whether it's pictures, whether it's your text, whether it's your email, whatever it is on that phone, Bluetooth has access to it on most phones, and we're able to get that between them. That seems a little scary. And again, in most cases, that Bluetooth connection really isn't very secure. And so hopefully that's one of the things that we're going to address in the future. Right now, my best advice for Bluetooth, I'm going to tell you to turn it off. And the reality is, turning it off does two things. It saves your battery, because Bluetooth takes power to run, and it'll save you from getting all those pictures you don't want of Ashley's birthday party, right? I just had to pick on you because we know you had a birthday. So there's a whole litany of things in there. Don't store stuff on your phone you don't want somebody to get. But the reality is Bluetooth is dangerous. So if I can turn it off, do. And it does have a longer range than you would think. So recently, not too long ago, my wife and I are driving in separate vehicles to Nebraska City. And every time my phone would ring, because my phone was also paired with her car, it was actually grabbing it in her car. And she was probably 100 to 200 feet ahead of me at least. Now, it didn't make a very great connection, and it would cut off. But it was kind of astounding to me that it was that far of a connection point could actually be established just off my phone. That scared me a little bit. And so now when I'm in my car, the only way I connect to my car is actually through the cord. And I know that seems paranoid, but I see this kind of stuff all the time, so it does make me a little paranoid. So the other thing that most phones now have and a lot of devices is this idea of near-field communications. So some of it's pretty neat. If I have a Samsung phone and somebody else has a Samsung phone and I want to share contacts with them, I can do the little bump, right? That's kind of handy. Or I can send data and I can pay for my meals at McDonald's. Well, okay. I guess if that's what you really want to do. But generally it's a very short distance. A couple of inches at most. And so in theory, that's a little bit safer. Until you're standing in line, and you're in line at somewhere like an airport, and I come by with my backpack, and I've got a higher powered reader, and I'm actually trying to scan all of those at the same time. So again, it's one of those things, if I don't need it, turn it off. Is it more of a hassle to have to go in and turn it on when you want it? Yes. But does it save possibly you losing data, losing money in this case of getting a fraudulent connection? And if it's just a couple bucks and I just wander through that line and charge everybody for McDonald's coffee, you may not even notice it. But there are also now tags that are essentially passive. They don't have their own power adapter, and we're starting to see those appear in a lot of devices. Ideally, does anybody here work in Walmart? So in Walmart, what they really like to do is put a tag on every product, and you can scan your entire cart when you go out at once. Instead of having to scan each individual item, if it would excite those little tags and you'd be able to check out in one row, that'd be pretty nice. So the other place we see something similar to that is if you have a pet, and you've heard the term microchip on a pet. You essentially are creating a passive tag on your pet. It stores a little bit of data, and it's a way that we can figure out who owns the Chihuahua that's running around the campus. It's not limited, though, to your pet. Increasingly, there are companies that are offering to allow you to be chipped, usually on your hand or your wrist, and that's how you gain access to sensitive areas, or you use that to get onto your computer by that chip. You have a scanner, and wherever that chip is, it's about the size of a grain of rice, and it's implanted under your skin. Point, and here you go. But here's the question. How many of you would do that for a job? So think about, I know some of you work in a bank. What if they said the only way to get into that bank vault is if you had a chip? Would you do that? You go to work at Google. Google's going to pay you $150,000 a year, but you have to get a chip in your hand to get into the data center. Would you do it? Yeah. Oh, so it's all about the money part, right? Yeah. So now, one of the things that we see about those microchips, like in your pets and everything else, everybody panics and goes, they're going to be able to track everywhere I'm at. Well, not so much. They really are a very short distance, and they don't have a GPS tracker in them like they show in the movies. It's only when you get close enough to an actual scanner that it would actually be able to read that tag. And generally, you're 6 to 10 inches at most on those scanners. So we're seeing those all over. So you're seeing them in your automobile. The automobiles, a lot of times, parts now have an NFC tag in it. So when you put in a new alternator in your car, it already knows how to program for it. Kind of a really neat thing to do. So transportation, offices, we're putting them on equipment to try to track equipment. Where is equipment going? How are we paying for things? So you're seeing this NFC, that near field. You also call it RFID tags, radio frequency ID tags. And you're going to see this more and more often. Well, if we deploy it, you're going to have somebody attack it because there is money. So whether it's the idea of an eavesdropping, man-in-the-middle attack. So a man-in-the-middle attack says, I'm going to intercept your communication, grab it, and then I'm going to be able to use it again in the future. So you're kind of sitting in between. And we're going to create a man-in-the-middle attack on Wi-Fi and show you what that looks like. But whether we're stealing the device, we're cloning the device, all of those different kinds of things are really going to be a problem, I think, in the future as we start seeing more and more of these deployed out there. So whether it's that idea of data theft, so turn off things when you don't necessarily need them. And I think our phones are going to get smarter, and the programmers are, and they're going to make quick toggles for some of those. So right now, on your iPhone, you can flip up very quickly and you can turn off most of your wireless communications. Now, the problem is, can you turn them off permanently? If I just swipe up on my iPhone, do I get to turn it off permanently or does it reset? It resets in 24 hours on your Wi-Fi and other settings. So it's not a permanent switch, but we're getting closer. So how do we fix that? So RFID attacks are going to become very, very common. So the older tags are very, very basic. They don't contain a whole lot of information. They contain a small string of numbers, and those numbers are then used in a database. So we need to figure out a way to protect them. So think about this. What if I walk into a store, and what they're doing is checking out with an RFID tag, and I switch tags? Do we have that happen now at Walmart with people switching tags? Yeah. great, I'm going to take the tag off this $2 pair of socks and put it on a TV, and I'm going to walk out the door. It happens every day in a Walmart somewhere or in a shopping center. So we're going to have that idea of unauthorized tags. In other words, they swap them. Or we're going to have fake tags people are going to be able to create. And they're going to say, hey, I know the tag for that price of socks. I'm going to make a tag or buy a tag, and I'm going to replace that with one that is non-authentic. So in some cases, it's pretty apparent. If you walk into a Rolex store and suddenly you're trying to check out and the Rolex shows up on their scanner at $100, they're probably going to be onto that. But the reality is at Walmart, if you're trying to check out a couple of TVs and they're showing up at $150 instead of $600, is that clerk going to probably know? No. So we need to come up with some plans and have ways we can get that. It even really affects us in the area of animals. Some animals are worth a lot of money. For example, down in Falls City, a man just bought a cow, a bull, for $1.54 million. $1.5 million for a bull. Holy crap. I can guarantee that that bull is chipped and has a way to identify them. So how can we prevent somebody from cloning those kinds of things? And we need to think about that as we start working through some of these scenarios. So RFID tags are really one of the scary things we're using. They're great. I love the idea of throwing everything into my cart at Walmart or Staples or Shopko or wherever it is. I guess Shopko is probably a bad example. But I put everything in my cart and I go through the checkout line and it scans everything at once. Wouldn't that be great? Because most places now are moving to these self-shopping aisles. Great. I'm not willing to sit there and scan every item. So I have left carts behind. If I had it all in one cart, I could go through, it would be scanned right away. But it leads to some other problems. How do I prevent this idea of this theft? How do I make sure that the tags that are on those items are right? Most of us have experienced, if you watch when you check out, you've gotten the wrong price on something probably. If you haven't, you haven't probably been watching very carefully what the prices are that are going up on there. So it's, again, another way we need to look at that and be able to check and scan those and look at it. So we talked briefly about Bluetooth. We talked about NFC. But the biggest one we have that we really need to think about is wireless communications. All of us have them. We use them every day. If you're on our campus, you're probably on Go Blue. If you're at home, you have your own wireless connection. We need to think about how we can make those safe for all of us. So when I get on my computer and I go out and I'm on a wireless network, it's a little scary for two reasons. So do I know when I'm in a hotel that Wi-Fi connection is safe and encrypted? Do I have any guarantee that that information is safe? No. I'm sitting in a hotel and I see a wireless network and I say, oh, that one says Best Western. I better log into that one. That seems like the right network. It is very easy for somebody to set up a fake connection and route all the traffic through their computer. And if they're routing all that traffic, can they see everything I do? Yes. Everything from passwords to my bank account, and good luck getting any money out of that. So we need to think about these wireless networks rather than just log into them and blindly get our data stolen, get our information stolen, get stuff cloned. So wireless LANs are also important from our house. And it can be as scary as, what if your neighbor's using your wireless connection? Because you were nice enough and you just set it open so anybody could get on there. What if he's downloading child porn? Where are they going to track that connection to? And we think, hey, maybe that's a fictitious example, but it actually happens a lot. People downloading stuff off the internet that they shouldn't aren't necessarily stupid. If I see a wireless connection that's open, why wouldn't I use it? And in fact, we dedicate a lot of resources for what's called war driving, where we point out where open connections are. There are websites where we can go to and find every open connection literally in the world. Well, that's handy. I'm driving around with my computer and I need to get on and send in my homework via Blackboard. But it's also a little scary. Because I really don't want the FBI knocking in my door. And maybe it's not child porn. We throw that out kind of as that big red herring because everybody goes, ooh, child porn is bad. And it is. But there's a lot of other things that happen on wireless networks. So what if they just set up a spamming site? So they're pushing out a spam site or spam emails, all those kinds of things because we didn't set up our connection and protect it at all. And maybe we do want to be nice and let our neighbors in on our wireless, but suddenly they're on Netflix all the time and we don't have enough connection speed that we can turn in our Blackboard homework. So, some of this, if you've been in networking, is a repeat, but all of our wireless LANs, they start with the number 802, and it starts 802.11. And then the letter or number behind that tells us the standard and that speed. So the original 802.11a was one of the first ones, and A and B were the predecessors to everything we've done. And they would effectively go 54 megs a second. So 8A and 8B aren't bad. G is a little faster. N is even faster. N is what you actually have on your campus right now. And if we look at the wireless access points, and N can do 2 to 3 to 400 megs per second. It's faster than most of your internet connections. Quite frankly, it's probably for your house, it's fast enough. The latest standard is actually AC, and AC can go 7 gigs per second. So in theory, it could replace your desktop connections, except for one problem. When you have a desktop connection, you all have your own connection back to that wireless or that wired device. All of the wireless is shared. So if I have 7 gigs per second, which is a theoretical speed, I'm not going to get that to every computer. It goes down dramatically based on the number of computers you have got trying to log in. If you go to a basketball game or a football game at UNL, and you try to get on their Wi-Fi, what happens? If you've been there, it's really slow because that gets chopped up. It's like a garden hose, and now you're sending it 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 different directions, and it dramatically gets slower and slower and slower. Whereas a hardwired connection doesn't have that limitation. And so at some point, does wireless replace wired connections in an office? It's possible, but it's going to take a lot of effort to get there. The other point I want to look at here is how they lie to you. So, in theory, wireless 802.11 AC can have data rates up to 7 gigs per second. And when they tell you that, it's at about 6 inches away from that transmitter with nobody else connected. Is that realistic? Are we 6 inches away from the wireless transmitter? And in fact, those speeds drop off in a geometric measure because your signal strength drops off that way. And so when you get 30, 40 feet away, you may be 1/10 of that speed. Is it still fast enough? Yeah. Do we still use it all the time? Yeah. But it's just interesting that these manufacturers want to lie to you and tell you that it's this great speed when the reality is you're never going to see that. So this is a chart of to date. Now, there is another revision out past AC that's coming out. Doesn't change a whole lot of things in here. So AC is the latest version. If you're going to go out and buy a wireless access point, I would buy that in a heartbeat. AC will still work. Make sure you get one that's called a dual band. In other words, it's got the 2.4 and a 5 gigahertz signals. So this maximum data rate, we know that's a lie. And this range can vary a lot. So in theory, it says, oh, indoor range up to 115 feet or outdoor up to 460. Okay, if I go 450 feet, I am not going to have much signal at all, I can tell you that. So again, those ranges are kind of optimistic. They're certainly better than what we've had before, but we need more, in most cases, more transmitters, more access points, because we now have all these devices. And so earlier we mentioned the Apple Watch, and if you have an Apple Watch, what you don't realize, because you never set it up that way, but as soon as you pair your phone with your Apple Watch shares all the Wi-Fi data it has with it. And so every access point your watch or your phone is connected to, your watch will automatically connect to also. And that's actually good, so that in theory, and I haven't actually tried this, and I may have to, that if I left my phone at home, and my watch is here at Peru, it's connected to this Wi-Fi here, my phone's connected to my Wi-Fi at home, I can still get my data on my phone and on my watch. And I don't have to spend the extra $10 a month with Verizon to turn on the cellular data on it. So, takeaways are, we know we want to buy the greatest standard we can. If all you're buying is the $30 model at Walmart, expect it not to last very long. It may work for a while. Right now, if I were to go buy a wireless access point for my house, if I weren't going to spend $100 to $150, you're probably not getting a product that's going to last very long and have some security features that we're going to talk about. So what do we need then to get on a wireless network? Well, most of us have these devices and we don't even need to do anything because it's built in. It's built in on my laptop. It's built in on your phone. If I want to connect a wired computer to the network, and it's a wireless-only network, I need some kind of an adapter. And so you'll see a wireless adapter. They'll plug in with USB in most cases, and that becomes that antenna and that transmitter for that unit. On your tablets and laptops, the antenna is usually wrapped around the screen because that gives it a place to go. And then we need that access point. That piece that sits there and gives us our connection to the network. I thought I had it out here, but I don't. Nope. So, in the hallway, in this building, you're going to see access points. If you look up at the ceiling, you see a device with some blinky lights hanging down. That's an access point. And that is how we connect to that network. At home, you usually have one wireless access point, and that's it. So you have what's called a router or a bridge or a gateway. It's one device, does everything. That works pretty well at home, doesn't work so well on a corporate network, where in this building, one wireless access point isn't going to serve the building. So we need something called an access point versus a gateway or a router. And so you'll see the difference on some of these, and we'll look at a couple of them. So that access point acts as, they call it a bridge. So that access point is what connects us into our wired network. On our campus, we have, I believe, 145 now access points. There are 12 in this building alone for us to be able to connect. And part of that is how many of us now have devices that we connect to. And so when I talk to the IT department, they have had as many as 290 devices connected to wireless in this building at one time. That's a lot of devices. But if you look around and you see people with their phones, people with their laptops, all of us faculty running around with laptops, and we have iPhones, and we have Samsungs, and we're all connected to that network, that makes sense. And if we didn't have multiple devices, one device isn't going to be physically able to reach the entire building with signal. Even if it were, and we connected 290 devices to one device, it's going to go, nope, I can't do that. So we have multiple devices. In some cases, we're actually setting an access point in every individual classroom. And so ones where we're very data dense. If we're carrying video over wireless, so in some of these classrooms we have, and in this one we have one, we have an Apple box up front or an Apple TV, and we need to connect a screenshot from that. That's a lot of data if we're going to do that screen mirroring. And so to do that, we sometimes send it over that Wi-Fi, and we'll set Wi-Fi access points in each individual classroom. When we first built this lab, and we did that in 2011, because we didn't have the technology was not as great, we actually had 3 wireless access points in this room alone because these computers were all connected with wireless as an experiment. And it worked okay until everybody wanted to do something that was very data dense. So access points are a little different. If I need multiple devices in a setting, I'm going to purchase access points and probably some form of a controller for them, something that will run them and manage them so I don't have to do each one individually. So here on our campus, we don't have to go into each access point and change it or update it. We have a tool that looks at the entire network and updates it. So that is what we call infrastructure mode. That is the most common thing that we see with our Wi-Fi, but we don't have to. We don't have to. We can do what's called ad hoc mode. So ad hoc means kind of at will. And we can actually set up a connection from one computer to another with Wi-Fi. And when we do that, we can do that with that ad hoc connection. And we can actually bridge networks sometimes, and we can create some security holes. So that's why we have rules and restrictions. If you live in the dorms, you're not allowed to bring in your own router, are you? No. And that's part of the reason is they want to try to control that wireless network. So most of you have at your house some form of a WLAN gateway. So it's got all these kind of fun features bundled into it. It's got the access point. It's got a firewall usually. It's got a way to serve up addresses. And most of the time we just plug them in and they work. So we pick them up at Best Buy or we used to pick them up at Shopco, but apparently we won't be doing that anymore. And we pick up these devices, we plug them into our network, and in fact, in some cases, companies like Windstream provide it to us and just say, hey, you have Wi-Fi and a gateway right here. So there's a little bit of a difference between the residential and the commercial. Commercial is significantly more expensive. Those access points like we use here are close to $1,000 a piece for each one of those access points in the hallway. If I told you you had to spend $1,000 for your access point at home, you guys would probably all panic. You decide you're going to live at home with your parents forever. But all of this Wi-Fi creates some problems. And there is something that our book talks about, and we're going to look at a little bit, called the blurred edge of security. So when I have a wired network, I know where it stops. I don't have cables running across the street and out into Peru. I can stop that signal. With Wi-Fi, I can't. There's no hard edge. There's nowhere I can just stop and say, nope, that Wi-Fi stops at the campus edge. That Wi-Fi stops at my campus or at my apartment. And if you've lived in a busy apartment, so if you live in a very large apartment complex and you pull up your Wi-Fi because you want to join your network, you may see 30 or 40 or 50 different access points. We can't control it. It doesn't stop at that network edge. So that leads us to all different kinds of attacks that we can do on Wi-Fi. And Wi-Fi is dangerous because it goes outside of our building. So I told you the story of being down in Kansas City next to a bank, and I was able to get on because somebody had plugged in a wireless access point as a rogue access point in their office, and I was able to get onto their network. Because it didn't stop at the edge of that bank. It went nicely across that air gap into my hotel room, and I was able to get on there. So this is what we're talking about with this idea of a network. So here's a wired network. It's got a hard edge. I have a firewall. I have a disconnect. I know it doesn't go beyond that surface. But with a wireless network, I don't know what's happening outside of this edge. I don't know if you're sitting across the street, or you're sitting in that hotel, or you're sitting in the Panera Bread parking lot. I can't tell where you're at. I have created a damaging infrastructure that I can get a lot of issues with. Most companies, though, say, well, you know, we have to have Wi-Fi because our employees demand it. And in some cases, it isn't the employees, because most of them are locked down. It's usually what happens is it's those people with the C letters, CIO, CFO, and they brought their new iPad that they got for Christmas into the office and say, we need to make you hook this up. And that's weirdly how some of this happens. But we have a lot of places like our college campus. This college historically has an issue. This was one of the last college campuses in the United States that did not have Wi-Fi. Seriously, until a few years ago, we did not have Wi-Fi on campus. And it was done from a security standpoint. There were little spots of Wi-Fi available for certain devices, but we did not have Wi-Fi available for all the students. And it was partly this blurred edge. So we had a network administrator who said, I don't know what's going to happen. Are we violating a state law if we have Wi-Fi and you can reach it across the street? And technically in Nebraska, that might have been an issue. Because in Nebraska, as a public entity, we're not allowed to offer internet services. So in some states, cities have went out and built internet services for their communities. And it's a city-owned entity. We have laws in our state that block that. And so if we're providing an internet, and people can get that off campus, yeah, and it's that blurred edge. We don't know what students and faculty and staff and other people are all doing on that network. We're not controlling all of those elements, so we need to figure out a way we can isolate that traffic and make sure that it's not doing anything harmful. Now we're adding all these students with Wi-Fi devices. Do I know your laptop doesn't have viruses or any other stuff on it? No way to know that. If I'm a business and I let people log into my wireless network, or I'm a city, or I'm a county, and I have a wireless network, I don't know what's going on, what people are bringing in. And so all of these things, I can intercept data because it's all out there in the air. I can't stop it. All of those signals you send out are available for us to grab. And I'm hoping that you've managed to encrypt them, because if you're not encrypting them, or you're not using one of the later standards of encryption, every piece of that data I can read. So whether it's your username, your password, your bank account, who your boyfriend, girlfriend is, what your text messages are back and forth, all of those kinds of things we can see. And it's fairly scary. So, all these different things. We talked a little bit about a rogue firewall or rogue access point. That's as simple as you getting that $49 Belkin device and you plug it in. So, in our dorm rooms, it'd be nice, because maybe we have 3 or 4 devices and we don't have enough network jacks, and campus IT isn't very friendly about letting me hook up my PS4, i1, whatever it is, gaming system. So we hook up that rogue access point. So now we're behind a firewall. Just like we are down there at that bank that shall remain nameless in Kansas City. I've now got an access point in behind that firewall. They have a lot of elaborate security, but I just jumped over the fence and I'm right in there. So it's something we worry a lot about, especially on the corporate side. The reality is, you guys as students are already segregated off pretty heavily. If you had a wireless access point in your room, it's probably going to interfere with your neighbors more than anything else. And it's probably not into the earth. There's nothing that you can probably get to, hopefully, doing that. But if I'm a business, this scares the living daylights out of me. And I actually saw this at a law enforcement agency. And this law enforcement agency, which is maybe not too far from here, hired a local contractor, and they ran out of switch ports on a switch. And they needed to have another 4 or 5 access points, or connection points. And so, in this local computer guy's scenario, he plugged in a wireless switch. So, just like you go down to Belkin and buy one, he plugged one in and used those ports on it. But he left the Wi-Fi turned on, and it was set up as open. And so anybody driving by that law enforcement center could actually log into that entire network. So all of their criminal records, all available. So scary. So, rogue access point bad. Even worse, there's something called an evil twin. So an evil twin, we set up, and we're doing it in a malicious manner. So usually a rogue access point isn't malicious. An evil twin, we set up, and that's what we're going to do when we get back from break, is set up an evil twin. We set up a network that looks very similar to it, mimics the network we're trying to connect to. And so we set one up, and it looks like it says Go Blue. How do you guys know that that's an evil network or a good network? You don't. And so we're going to show you how easy that is to set up and what we're going to do. So in this case, we've got that evil twin connecting. Your network connects in. So usually there's a connection back. We're funneling traffic back in to our main network. So we also have the idea of we can grab that data and intercept it. So we're just monitoring that network. And especially, again, you have that open network because you were being nice to all your neighbors. Now everything you send on that open network, we can see it. And we can use something like Kismet, and we can record everything on there. And then we can use some tools and we can figure out what you've been sending. So hopefully we're doing that right. Even if it's encrypted, here's the scary part. Even if we encrypt it, I can still pull your data. Now, I may not be able to unencrypt it today, but as my computers get faster and faster, or I'm able to use other resources, or I find information about your company, I can unencrypt that data then if I ever get that key. Because even if it's encrypted, I can't hide that signals you're sending. I can see them and I can grab them. So, they call this a lot of things. The replay attack, hijacking, man-in-the-middle attack. It's really taking that evil twin to the end, where not only are you getting somebody to attach to me, you're now attaching to the main network, and you may be able to be sitting there for weeks on end and get data from your users, and they don't know that you're doing it. Because they're hooking into a network that looks like what they thought they were going to be onto. So here's the one I've seen of that quite often. If I go into an airport, it literally, in a backpack, I can set up a man-in-the-middle attack. And so I connect on one side, one Wi-Fi antenna, and I connect to the AT&T or whatever network it is. My other one, I push out and says AT&T network. And everybody that connects onto that network connection, I'm seeing everything they send. And people will send a lot of stuff in airports. A lot of stuff. So, we have other issues. So those home routers you buy for $40, we're finding out they're not very secure. One of the ways they're not very secure is most people don't go in and even change the username and password that controls that account. And so almost every Belkin I can log into with admin. And worse, I can get to them from the outside. So if I find that IP address you're at, I can access your router and I can change that. And I can, in some cases, take over that router. We've got a lot of software out there floating around. We can take over your router. We can make changes ourselves. Now we're able to read all your data, figure out what's on the inside of your network if we really want to, steal everything you've got for data, hook up to your cameras at home. So as your children are laying there in bed, some creepy guy on the internet sitting there watching them, we can push content to your computer. If I'm in on that wireless network that's at your house, I've gotten access to it, and I want to set you up, it isn't that hard to do, guys. And I will tell you, I'm sure going to prison for child porn is not the way you want to go to prison, right? Yeah, I'm not being uber paranoid, but it is really not that hard to do. We could put content on there. We could download stuff to your computer so that we just set up your computer, and every time you go out to a bank site, it grabs your username and your password. We get that. Maybe we inject malware into your computer. And so when you go shopping for anything, you look at, hey, I want to look at shoes. It redirects you to my shoe shopping site that's paid me a nickel every time you go there. So those home routers are really scary. And part of the reason you buy it for $49, do you think Belkin or TP-Link or TrendNet or any of these companies you buy from, are they willing to update it? Because you paid once for them and you said, here's my money. They're not willing to update it. They may have one update every couple of years, if that. But once you've owned it for a little bit, they're not willing to update. There's no reason for them to. They don't have a monetary stream. So the other piece I'm going to say, if you're going to go buy a new home router, spend some money. Buy something like an Orbi or an Aros. So they actually do update it. So you're paying a yearly fee to get the latest updates. And again, nobody wants to spend money if they don't have to, right? None of us do. But we also don't want to get compromised. Now, if you live in the country and you don't have a neighbor for 3 miles, great, do whatever you want. But that's not the reality for most people. And in fact, from my house in Auburn, I can see, with my wireless access point, I can actually see 18 different wireless access points. And about half of those are setting open. I can also see some other things that are scary about wireless. So when I go buy a printer, do I buy a wireless access printer? Isn't that kind of handy? You can just print to the wireless printer. Oh, good reason to not trust it. Because now, not only can I see your printer, but if I can get a hold of your printer, and your printer's connected to the network, it's another way I can get in. It's one of the really scary ones, because I can connect in. Now, usually what I do when I see wireless printers somewhere when I go, is I'll print a test page that says, hey, you should probably secure your wireless on this printer. Because I'm kind of bored like that sometimes when I go places. But the reality is, it's that wireless, all these things we put in wireless now are all an attack vector for me to get in there. And now we have all kinds of things. We have wireless thermostats. Great. That's another way we can get in. We have wireless printers. We have Alexa devices all over the place. You have Google Home devices. They're all over the place. So any of these attack vectors, they can actually get in. And if you aren't updating that software, so you're not up with the latest resources, you're going to get hacked at some point. That's the sheer reality about it. All right, if you look in Blackboard, a couple of things for Thursday. Make sure you have read Chapter 8, which is what we're on. Hopefully we will get everything done and turned in by this Sunday. Will be the due date for week 8. I am not assigning anything over spring break if you get everything done. That would be good. So this week there is, let me move this out of the way. So there is an assignment and a discussion board. So on the on-campus section, we will probably cover parts of the discussion board, but not all of it. There is an assignment this week. You have to pick one of those. I think I gave you 6 different options. There is a quiz. Yeah, I know you had. There is a quiz, yes. So there is a quiz, a discussion board, and an assignment. And that assignment, like I said, you have 6 different options. Pick one. Some of them require you to do things on a simulated environment. Some of them are just purely research questions. And then the last one, that discussion board, again, we'll talk more about our surveillance and our Wi-Fi, but we're really looking at, find the right spot, we're really looking at that idea of home WLANs, wireless LANs. What do they, that's weird. So what kind of wireless LANs do they cause issues? And so I encourage you, when you go home, and if you're on campus, you're probably not going to see a lot, but when you're at home, fire up your laptop or your phone and see how many wireless access points you can see. There is actually a great tool. So at the end of your chapter, in case project 1, and it is not one of your options, but there is a great wireless tool in there, and I loaded it on this laptop, which now it's got to restart, because of course it went to sleep to make everybody happy, but it is a Wi-Fi scanning tool. And so right now, in this building, that's a list of all the wireless access points I can see on this. So there's a list of about 20 right there. I'm actually connected on one of them. But this is a scanning tool we can see to use that. And one of the things that we often do on our Wi-Fi access points, and we think it's a great security, we can hide that, what we call that SSID. So in other words, that name that shows up, you go, man, if I hide that, it doesn't broadcast it, I can't see it. Well, if you just look on your phone, you're only going to see 3 of these. But yet I can have a tool like this out. I downloaded this for free. And this shows me that I have well over 20 different access points available and I can see them. And in fact, on your Android phone, there's a tool called Wi-Fi Analyzer you can grab. Apple doesn't allow some of that on the Play Store, so it's a little harder to grab. So make sure you read Chapter 8 so we can have some discussion about access points. We're probably going to look at one, set it up. Next week, when you come back after break, we're actually going to create a man-in-the-middle attack. And so we're going to see how many of your fellow students we can fool. And we can steal their data. All right, get out of here. Any questions? Stay warm. It is going to be 70 degrees and sunny by Thursday.
Hey, you know,
I may have looked at the weather for Hawaii, but.
When I did my assignment, I didn't mention one case. Or which
one it was?
Yeah.
I can probably figure that out.